afternoon, and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that wants to shed a light on the fundamental contributions of African Americans in the building of this country. This is a show about Black excellence, and today, to incorporate this Black excellence is no one else but Arva Rice, President and CEO of the New York Urban League that has recently released a State of Black New York report for the first time in 10 years. This has been released in conjunction with the Robin Hood Columbia University Poverty Tracker and with the support for United Way of the New York City, White and Case, and New York Women's Foundation. You can download that report, which is very important, on nyul.org/SOBNY. Welcome to our show, Ms. Arva Rice.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here with us because I've been following your organization for quite a few years. Prior to joining New York Urban League, you were the executive director of Project Enterprise, which is an organization that provides business loans and technical assistance to entrepreneurs. So you're helping young people to become entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. You're also a passionate community leader. You have more than 20 years of experience in the nonprofit area. You have dedicated your life and your career to empower young people, in particular young girls and women, in order to find their path to success. You are the recipient of many awards. I'm just going to cite the most recent one, the Chancellor's Educational Leadership Award from CUNY and an Alum Award from Northwestern University. What is the mission and the call to action of New York Urban League, for those who don't know what this is?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. So the New York Urban Leagues were, actually the New York Urban League is one of 90 urban leagues around the country. The national movement was started over 110 years ago. And it was started when Black people were making that great migration from picking cotton and oranges and tobacco and moving to the North. And they got to the North with this promise of equal rights and equal opportunity, and found out that, Jim Crow just had a different look when it came to the North. And so they needed people to help them to, find jobs, to find housing, to make and build networks. And that's how the urban leagues were started. Our mission is to empower communities and to change lives. And we have been doing that for over 100 years in New York City.
That is amazing. And it's a fantastic organization that takes care of trying to fill the gap between the wealth of the white people and Black people in this country, which is a gap that is come from 400 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. And so our organization works specifically in education, employment, housing, and healthcare around the country. And in New York City, we focus specifically on education, employment, and advocacy. And so those are the core key areas, helping young people get to and through college, helping them to find and discover careers in STEM education. We have a very robust young professionals. So if there's individuals who are of that age of 22 to 40 and they want to give back, they may have marched this summer and they want to figure out what's next, have a lot of opportunities for continued engagement and involvement, as well as community give back with the New York Urban League.
And this is really the moment. I mean, today we are seeing something absolutely disgusting.
Yes.
This is a coup. Okay, the President of the United States has incited a coup. And this has to be said because this is what it is. And now is telling them go home after he has called them to go there,
right,
and protest against something that doesn't need to be protested about because they are just following what the Constitution says. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So being Italian, And having always looked at America as the beam of democracy, that's what they say, right? And seeing this is absolutely appalling. My phone is ringing off the hook all day.
I can imagine. I can only imagine.
All day long. All my friends from all over the place are calling me saying, what the hell is going on there? What's happening? What's happening? Are they crazy? Are they nuts? So there is a lot of work to do for organizations like yours, more and more, unfortunately.
There really is. There really is. This, and I know that your phone was ringing earlier this summer in June when we were all, you know, in New York pause and saw the death of George Floyd. And so we all will remember where we were watching those moments, watching him lose his life. And unfortunately, we're all going to remember today. And we're all going to remember when our Capitol was stormed. And so we thought that we were closing the door. 2020 was the big year of, you know, it was supposed to be perfect vision, and it ended up being perfect COVID and perfect racism reckoning. And now we thought 2021 is going to bring something else, and it's bringing something else in this images that we're seeing today. And yeah, right before I got on, I saw that, you know, they're just not moving these protesters the same way they did those who were protesting in the marches earlier this summer. So there's a lot of work to still be done, to say the very least.
I bet that if it was Black Lives Matter storming the Capitol, they would have already sent some tear gas and some rubber bullet in the crowd.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit of a different response. So it is a challenging moment that we continue to be in. It's different, but it's still a challenging moment that we continue to be in as Americans.
I live it. I live in Harlem. I know you are a Harlemite also. So this is being here and seeing what's going on and experiencing it, for me, it's crazy. It's absolutely unbearable.
Yeah. It is crazy.
I want to ask you one thing. I met Mark Morial, that is your president, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, a few times. And I know that they publish a State of Black America report each year, and they've done so for the last 44 years. Yes. What prompted you to publish a specific report for New York now? What is that made it important for you to do that?
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, Mark Morial has done a fantastic job as our national president, and the State of Black America was actually started when Vernon Jordan was the CEO of the National Urban League. And at that time, people had no idea the conditions that Black people lived in. They, you know, didn't interact with them at all. Maybe their maid came in or somebody who was a service person, but didn't have any conversations, had no idea what their lives were like, what their homes were like. And so this report was published saying that these are the conditions of the housing. This is the opportunities for education or the lack of opportunity. This is what's happening in terms of healthcare. And it literally startled the nation. They were literally stunned by the statistics that were placed in front of them. And so Vernon Jordan and his predecessor and his the people who followed him basically put together this report on an annual basis. After a period of time, some of the local affiliates in Philadelphia, in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York, we said, you know what, we want people in our cities to know about what the conditions are of African Americans as well. Not only to highlight those conditions, but then to say, what is the roadmap that we can build to make changes and close those gaps? And so in New York City, we used to publish the State of Black New York, and we just have not published it for over 10 years. And so in keeping with our centennial anniversary, we said it was important for us to go back and to mark this moment in time and say, how are African Americans doing, and what is the roadmap that we need to develop for our way forward?
Oh, I didn't know it was your centennial, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And so is that why there is a gala at the end in March?
We're having a grand gala in March. It was supposed to be in June of 2020, but at that time, our governor had us all sheltered in place as well, or a New York pause, as he liked to call it. So we were all on New York pause, and so we decided that we would go ahead and put it off. And so we will be having our virtual celebration of the 100 years of service in the community on March 16th.
And where can people have information about that?
Sure, they can go onto our website, which you already mentioned at www.nyul.org. There's a tab that'll tell you all about our State of Black New York, and also a tab that'll tell you about our upcoming centennial celebration.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I've read not the whole thing, but nearly, and it's really extremely interesting. And I noticed one thing that is very well organized and subdivided by main sector and areas, like you mentioned before, like education, healthcare, civil rights, and so on. So I would like you to go into some details of these various sections. Like, for example, we can start with education, with economics.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the report is divided into six different sections. And so they look at some of the areas that correspond with the work of the Urban League, as well as areas that are of interest to African Americans. And so we look at income, we look at education, we look at health, we look at civic engagement, we look at civic participation, excuse me. And then lastly, we look at the digital divide. And the digital divide we thought was important before we came into COVID, and now has become increasingly more underscored. And as you mentioned, the data points from the report themselves come from a couple of different places, including a collaboration that we did with the Robin Hood Foundation that does a poverty tracker that looks at a grouping of New Yorkers and follows their trajectory over time, and looks at how they are being able to sustain trying to get out of poverty and those places and spaces that kind of pull them back. So we looked at that reporting that's done with Robin Hood, with Columbia, as well as census statistics and some others, in order to come up with the data sets that we've utilized for the State of Black New York. So under economics, which is the first section, not surprisingly, because the New York Urban League is always focused on the economic well-being or lack of well-being of African Americans. And so we have supported, entrepreneurship programs, we've supported home ownership, all the sorts of things that traditionally help to build and support wealth. And there's a lot of statistics throughout the report. That's why I encourage people to download it. But one of the ones from the income section that really struck me is that over 52% of African Americans in New York City make $50,000 or less. So more than 52% make $50,000 or less in a city like New York. We all know how much it costs to rent. We all know how much it costs to ride the subway and to get a loaf of bread. And so we have individuals who are really struggling in order to have the monies that they need to support themselves and their families. So that was one of the statistics that really stood out for me around income. And there's like I said, a number of others that are in the report. We also talked about education and its importance, that education, and particularly a college degree, is the biggest buffer to poverty. So the fact is that if people have a college education, they're able to survive a couple of months of unemployment, even longer periods of unemployment. Some of the other things that are indicators of falling into a state of poverty, including divorce and sickness. But with that college degree, it really serves as a buffer to that. And unfortunately, we're just not preparing African American students for success in college and beyond. And so still to this day, even though particularly African American women, we hear about Black girl magic. So we're doing well in a lot of different areas, but still African Americans, only 16% have a bachelor's degree versus their white counterparts, who have a 29% of them have their bachelor's degrees. And like I said, that's important when you think about it in terms as a buffer to poverty. And there's a lot of other statistics on education within the report, but I just wanted to highlight that one as well.
And I know that as far as that is concerned, helping people to go to have a quality education, and also what you mentioned before about helping to housing. I underline this because this show, I'm doing it because I want white Americans who don't know yet, and Europeans to understand the incredible contribution that African Americans have given, and what the real situation is, because it really is not told as it is. So when you say housing, help to housing, can you explain why you're saying that? Because I don't think people know that Black families, when they went to the bank to ask for a loan to get a home, they were refused it most of the times. So
Sure. When it comes to housing, you have twin issues, and that's, or to say you have it coming and going, right? So you're talking about applying for a mortgage. And the fact is that for a long time, there was a general practice, unfortunately, it was literally a practice of redlining. And
yeah.
so, bankers would look at neighborhoods and they would put a red line and say, this is where we're going to provide a, really good competitive mortgage. And outside of that red line, then, or inside of the red line, you're not going to get good competitive rates. We may not provide a mortgage at all. And so African Americans were unfortunately found themselves redlined out of being able to have quality homes. On the other side, then let's say you're able to get a home, you're able to work it out, whether it's just a virtue of the hard work, being able to get your college degree, being able to do well, maybe inheriting something from your family, all these sort of things all came together with that hard work. You're able to purchase a home. African Americans often are in homes that are undervalued. So even if you're in a home, your house may be valued at a much lower point than the white counterparts. And so that plays in your ability to borrow against that home, your ability to use money for, to send your kids to school or to make renovations on that home, be able to start a small business. So the issues that African Americans have around home ownership are being able to first qualify to get the home. And then once they have it, are often undervalued in it. And that's all results of systematic racism. And unfortunately, like I said, this summer with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, we all had to look directly into it.
That's it. That is, I think, the only positive side of COVID is that people were home and they were not working, not having activities outside. So they had to pay attention at what was happening. And that made it possible for people all over the world to understand what was going on in this country, what is going on in this country, what has been going on, but we haven't known before because there was nobody there with a telephone and a camera taping it. So I think that was the only positive side I can find of COVID is people realize what's going on and they reacted, the whole world reacted to it.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, because of COVID, the whole world had slowed down. So even if you were an essential worker, after you were done with your shift, you weren't able to go to your church, your mosque, your synagogue. You weren't able to, go to the movies. You weren't able to go any place. So there was a period of time where we were all at home, right? And so whether we were essential worker or not, we had more time at home. And so we were all able to, unfortunately, see that 8 minutes and 46 seconds and not be able to deny it because we all saw it in at the same time.
It was the most horrible. I got panic attack after that. Until that moment, COVID did not really bother me. I mean, it was okay.
Right.
But when that happened, I started to feel sick. I was sick of being in a country that hates its citizens so much. The part of the country hates the other part of the country for no reason whatsoever. So it's really bad. You talked about digital divide. I've been doing for the last 20 years, 15 years, a conference at the United Nations, which is called Info Poverty World Conference, and it's about the digital divide. So this spring, when we do it in the UN again, you must come and talk about this because this is fundamental what you're talking about. And explain, please, to our viewers what you're doing there, digital divide.
Sure. When we talk about the digital divide, once again, it's in a couple of different areas. So it's the number of New York African American families who have access to broadband, so they're able to access high-speed internet. It's the number of individuals who have enough devices in order to be able to really access what education information is available on the internet, as we all know. When New Yorkers got sent home, 1.1 million public school children were told that they were no longer going to have school. Well, even if you did have a laptop, did you have three for three children, you know? And so we look at the number of equipment that is available to families. And then we also looked at by income level, who are the individuals who have access to broadband, and unfortunately found that the lower your income, the less opportunities that you have to have access beyond your cell phone. And so challenging young people to take on their activities and to continue their education when they only had access to a cell phone. When they got access to an actual laptop through their schools or through a community-based organization or through a volunteer program, if they were able to actually access internet because of the credit of their parents, it were all challenges that all roll into the digital divide. And so we do
Costs
not
are really high here. The cost of internet, Wi-Fi, and so on is really, really high in this country.
It is very
Much
expensive.
lower.
Yes, it is very expensive, and that's prohibitive as well. So those are some of the things that we look at in the digital divide section, and how it relates to education, how it relates to opportunity. And then on the other side is also, as we know, New York City is the second Silicon Harlem, and so the second Silicon Valley. And so there's so many opportunities for young people to be involved in and gain careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, but only if you're exposed to it, only if you know that there's an opportunity to do that, only if you start to be trained early to be a mini engineer and problem solver. And so we look at the number of African Americans that involved in the digital economy, and also challenge organizations to set a bar to be more inclusive of our communities.
And that is fundamental, that they start from when they are young, because the computers are a new language, it's not new anymore, but it's a language. And if you don't have that language, if you can't speak that language, you're cut out of a lot of opportunities. So
absolutely.
Very important. Then you have the chapter about civic participation, and the other one, which is very important, about social and criminal justice. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. When we talk about social and criminal justice, unfortunately, our African American boys and young men are interacting with the criminal justice system at a level that is, simply unacceptable. The theme of this year's report is inequality is unacceptable. And when you look at the statistics about the numbers of individuals that are in the criminal justice system throughout the state versus the population, it's literally abominable. And so we have both highlight some of those numbers in the report, but also talk about what are some of the things that we need to do in order to make sure that less young women are interacting with the criminal justice system.
And this is from the point of view of also having sentences which are not corresponding to the crimes, if there is a crime committed, compared to a white person who would be doing commit the same crime or the same offense. And that is also very important to underline.
Yes, African Americans definitely have harsher sentencing. We're perceived as being older than we are. 12-year-old, they think, 12-year-old girl, they think is 16, those sorts of things. And they all lend themselves to implicit bias that comes across in policing and also in sentencing.
And this is another terrible thing, because a white person doesn't have to have the same peril, really. When their son or their daughter leaves the house, their teenagers leave the house, as a Black person has. And I know from my friends, because sometimes I am with them and I feel that fear
Mhm.
of something happening. And I
Mm.
think this is absolutely unacceptable, unacceptable that this should happen.
Mhm.
And when they talk about black on black crime,
Mm.
I believe that, yeah, of course, there is black on black crime,
Mhm.
but there is a lot of white on white crime. Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about the fact that all the mass murderers are all white?
Mhm.
Why that is never brought to
Right.
the attention of people?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your saying that because yeah, people say black on black crime and that white on white crime isn't even a phrase, right? But the fact is that people unfortunately are involved in criminal activity with people that they're most closely around, right? So you know, white people end up in bad situations with white people. Black people end up getting in bad situations with black people because we're still living in a very segregated society. And so you find wherever you find a high concentration of poverty, you're going to find higher concentrations of criminality. And so the challenge is to be able to provide opportunities for those who are in poverty without the option of criminal options being the only ones that are presented and available to them.
We have less than a minute left of our conversation. So I would like you to leave our viewers with a note of hope about this coming year.
Mm-hmm.
So I let you talk passionately about what you think could be the good thing happening this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy New Year to your viewers. And even though from this report, there are a lot of sobering statistics, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We had a very trying and troubling 2020. But as you already said, Maria, so eloquently and well, the gift of COVID was that it slowed us all down. And we had to look at the reality of what are some of the challenges that we face, but also the ways in which we came together as a city. We clapped for hospital workers and we volunteered and gave money and we raised money for food and gave out food and we served the elderly and we cared for our younger children. And so I think that there's amazing, incredible work that can be done as we come together as a community. Last night, we saw an amazing, fantastic African-American woman who literally changed her state by turning it blue and has changed the nation by changing the Congress. And so
Yeah,
exactly. So if you don't have hope after seeing something like that happen, I literally get goosebumps just thinking about the work that she has done and the ways in which she just galvanized men and women to be involved and engaged in that cause. And she lost a big election and she could have pouted. She could have, just retreated, but instead she doubled down and she made a change that's going to be a change for, generations of people. And so I am hopeful because I think there's a little bit of Stacey Abrams in each and every one of us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for this. Thank you for giving me this time. Thank you to our viewer for being with us. We see you next Saturday, 12:30 on Spectrum 1993. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Arva Rice.
Thank you.